Welcome to the Geek podcast where everything is magic. I'm Void and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
I'm Magic.
You are Magic. Good job. Today we're talking about Magic the Gathering because that's basically what I've been playing for the last week. Magic the Gathering Arena specifically for me, but we widened out the topic to be Magic the Gathering as a whole because it's been around for a long time and then we have more to talk about basically.
Yeah, and I've got a lot more experience with Magic the Gathering than I do Arena since I installed it today, but I've been playing Magic for like 22 years overall since I started playing, so like it was 97, so...
I didn't realize that until we started talking about this like off the air after the episode last week, and I was like, wait, how much history with Magic do you have? And I was like, let's just do that as a topic. So that's where we are today. Before we get too far into it, I know we'd like to usually start with histories, but like I realized that some people might be like me where like you know of Magic, you're like ancillary to Magic, but you don't actually know any of the details, and we're going to get into some of the details later, but this isn't going to be like a super deep dive because I'm not capable of that right now.
I could give you a real deep dive of, early 2000s, late 90s competitive Magic, but right, what's going on right now? Nah.
Yeah, so quickly up front, I just wanted to cover like what it is. So like Magic the Gathering, which we'll probably just be calling Magic because most people do because it's shorter. It's a CCG, so it's a collectible card game. It's not like the LCGs that I've talked about in the past where you buy a pack and you have like one of every card. Like I really like that model. This is truly a CCG where there's always more cards to chase because it's randomized throughout the booster packs that you get. And sometimes they sell core sets and sometimes they sell like pre-packaged sets or things that are balanced against each other. But ultimately they want to get you like into the game so that you keep buying more and more packs. And that's really their whole business model. They keep rolling out new packs and new sets, and we'll talk about some of that later. But basically, there's always a chance to get more cards and you can try to collect the best cards. That's the business model that Magic is built around. And it's been around for a long time. Like it's been 26 years. I looked it up this morning. They started in 1993. So Magic is fairly old, but that also means that it's fairly well developed and there's a lot of depth there and there's a lot of things they've learned about the gameplay. So as they're refreshing sets and like changing over the cards, they refine it over time and they add new mechanics. And like I said, we'll get a little bit more into that a little later, but it's interesting to think that they've had 26 years of game design into this game already.
And it's really crazy going in right now, like starting up with Arena right now, it feels like it's the same game that I played for years and years and years in person, but there are things that have been going on, and it's online obviously, but there are so many new things that I can see how it's been modernized, that there's a lot of modernization in it as well from the time that I was playing. Like they've really balanced that very well, where I'm really impressed by the way that they've been able to make it not feel stale at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's more approachable than I think it's ever been, and I've had it put in front of me over and over again over the years, probably for the last like 15 years. I don't know. I remember it being around forever, maybe even longer than that. And I never latched on until this time, it's so interesting for me that like I got into Magic the Gathering Arena. But again, back to the core game, like you build a deck. I should say it's owned by Wizards of the Coast now, which is the same people who own D&D, and they own a couple other properties too. But they've been acquiring more and more. And so Magic is one of their core things that they own. You build a deck of 60 cards out of your card pool that you own personally, or I guess you could borrow from friends or borrow someone else's deck or buy a pre-made, but it's a 60 card deck, and that's like a standard format. Again, there's lots of formats, there's lots of nuance, but we'll glaze over that for now. Each player starts with 20 health, and basically you play land to get mana. So like land is a type of card, you play the card, and then on your turn, you can turn that card 90 degrees to like tap the land, and that'll give you mana that you can use to cast the other spells in your hand. All of this, if you've ever played Magic, sounds extremely basic, but if you haven't, these are some of the like basics you should know. So those spells in your hand, they can be like actual spells that have an effect or do damage or have something like happen in the arena of play. Otherwise, they can be a creature that you're just like summoning a creature that goes out and then you can attack with it, you can defend with it, that kind of thing. And the overall goal of the game is to reduce the other person's health to 0 while yours is still above 0. And that's like Magic in a nutshell. It's a card game, 1v1 in standard format, 60 cards. You use your land, use your mana to cast the cards in your hand, and you defeat the opponent. Would you add anything else to like the basics?
Not really. I mean, you have different kinds of spells. That the big difference here. This is like Hearthstone's grandparent in a lot of ways. Where if you've played Hearthstone, you'll know that you have the creatures and you play everything and you attack, blah blah blah. But the main thing here is that there are different types of things that you can play. There are different colors. Not everybody has the same kind of resources, and so a lot of the strategy comes in with being like different deck archetypes, kind of like the heroes in Hearthstone, and just that you get different kinds of spells to play all the time rather than just creature and spell in Hearthstone. There are lots of different things going on.
Oh yeah, and we will talk about that here in a little bit. But before we get too much into like the intricacies of what we found, and you know a lot more than I do, I'm just kind of like learning all this in the last week or two. But I want to talk about our histories because that's always a good place to start. And I'm going to go first because mine is super short. Like I've always been Magic adjacent, kind of like I said up front, but I never really got into it until the last week or two with Magic the Gathering Arena. And really my brother is the main person that's gotten me into Magic over and over, like over the years, honestly, just because he has consistently been playing it or had friends who were playing it or had access to cards. And I never really collected Magic cards. It just wasn't my thing, which surprises no one these days, knowing how I am with like physical formats of stuff. But even back in the day, even when I was a kid, like I just never really collected Magic cards. It wasn't something I did, but he was always more into it. So he's drawn me in and gotten me to try it out over the years. And finally, this time when he brought me back to Magic the Gathering Arena, because this is the second time that I tried it. The first time it didn't stick with me, but it really seemed to click for me this time. And you know, like a lot of other CCGs and LCGs, as I've tried Magic over the years, I really like piloting a good deck, but I'm not a big fan of deck building. And there's a couple formats that I've been playing around with online where I'm finding some fun in deck building, but it's within very narrow constraints. So I'll talk about that when we talk about a few other formats. But I still think that's kind of like where I'm landing. Like I enjoy piloting a really good deck.
I'm the opposite with Magic. That like usually I like really, tightly put together something. I get really irritated when I have to like start with a very small pool of cards and work up. And it's like this time going in with Arena, all of it goes back to the years of history. I have the decades of history I've got with it, where it's like I want to build this deck. This deck isn't doing what it's supposed to do, and I know how to fix it. And it's like, why did they not include this in this deck? And so I am automatically honed in on tweaking and trying to make these pre-made decks they give you at the beginning of the game. I gave them $5. I like the game. I downloaded it today. I like the game. I gave them $5 just to get more cards so that I could start putting like counter spells in the blue deck. I'm like, why are there no counters in this? This is ridiculous. There's not any permanent removal. It's so it was like I like the building the deck in this one, where in other games I don't necessarily. And I think it's because I have that history of doing it for so long.
Well, I want to know about this because you said you've been playing for a really long time, right? And I just didn't know this about you either until like literally last week after the episode when we were talking, after we stopped recording. This is when I found out that you had such like a long history with it.
Like I thought I had mentioned it before, but I guess I hadn't, where I was 14 years old whenever I got into Magic. Like it was around the same time. I know for a fact that it was around the same time that Final Fantasy VII was out, because it was the class I was in. This dude named Bubba McConnell. Like I think his actual name might have been Michael, but I honestly don't remember. Like everybody called him Bubba. So welcome to Summertown, Tennessee. And it's but he gave me a green and red deck. Like he and his friends, and they were all of my friends too, but I just never, they had all gotten into Magic and I hadn't. And so like they were a year ahead of me, and so I just hadn't been right there, and I just started high school. And so over that last year they had all gotten into it, and Bubba gave me one of his decks, and it was like, I loved this game. Like it was an immediate love. For when he explained it to me, played a game with it, like I fell hard because of how easy it was, but also of just how much stuff that you could do. And what was kind of ridiculous, and I'm sure that there are going to be listeners who have this I say problem, but it's kind of a problem. Being from the South, it's very, very conservative, especially in the 90s, of the idea of Magic in general. Like if you remember in the late 80s, like that Tom Hanks movie, Mazes and Monsters, when people would play Dungeons and Dragons and then murder people? Like, remember stuff like that?
Yeah, not really. This is one of those things where like you and I are just a couple years apart, but I never had any of that. And part of it might be where I grew up too. I didn't grow up in the South, but like I think all of those scares happened just a few years before I was old enough for them to matter. And by the time I got into this kind of thing, like that stigma didn't exist anymore.
Well, I highly suggest going and watching the movie Mazes and Monsters with Tom Hanks, because it's totally ridiculous and like kind of encapsulates everything about that particular scare era of this. But it took off because it was during that time that, like, being from the South, being so conservative, the idea of casting spells, especially things that could raise things from the dead and had pictures of burning skeletons on them when you're like casting a fireball or incinerate, is my mom had to check all this out. Like, she went through every single card in that green red deck that Bubba gave me and made sure that it was appropriate because I was casting spells. And it's just, I know that there are people who are listening who may have had that same experience around that same time, but looking back, it's so odd because this was during the time that like Doom was supposed to be making people murder people and making kids murder people, and it was before the GTA stuff was even a thing. Like, it was way before Grand Theft Auto 3 was out and making people kill people. So like all this was going on, and like it was an every Friday night thing after that we had a card shop in town that was we just called it Carl's. I honestly can't remember the name of the actual name of the shop. It was just Carl's, and we went to his shop and we had Magic tournaments every Friday. There was a big community in our town, and we just went and we hung out, and it was what Friday nights were. One of us would get off of work. It wouldn't be going home. It would be we went to the card shop to hang out, and we would either pay. Sometimes those of us who had money would pay for somebody else to enter a tournament because they didn't have the entry fee, like stuff like that. Like, it was really communal and really a wonderful, wonderful community there, where some of the memories of high school, like of just weird things that happened, are all in Carl's shop there. And like, I couldn't drive for the first couple of years of doing this, where I was like 14, 15 years old, and there was a Taco Bell directly across the road. And so I would go at 11:30 at night because we were going really late with these tournaments sometimes, and we were hungry. So I would walk through the drive-thru, and eventually Taco Bell put up a "you can't walk through the drive-thru anymore" sign because of me. And then I couldn't get tacos late at night anymore, and people had to go drive over there, and it was sad. It was a sad time, and it was because of Magic and me that Taco Bell people can't walk through the drive-thru anymore in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. So
that's sad.
So there's that.
That's very sad.
But yeah, it's sad. But that was what it was. That was my high school years, and that kept on until college. Like, I started playing like right around the time Weatherlight came out, and so I was keeping up with all of the releases, going to state tournaments, pre-releases, and all these kind of things. And all of my friends were into it. I was never really competitive with it. I didn't like. I play to win, but at the same time, I tend to play to have fun. So I would never play the real meta decks. I would play the ones that I liked the best, and sometimes they did well, sometimes they didn't. And like, I only won a single tournament solo in my entire Magic career. I've only placed first in an overall tournament one time, and I won a couple of two-headed giants with friends where you're playing kind of 2v2, and I won a couple of those, but I won a single tournament solo, and because I'm a blue player. Like, that's what I am. I love control decks. I love counter decks. I love control decks. And I won this tournament with a Drago deck. This was what it was back at the time. It was called Drago, where it was a blue deck that had 0 creatures in it. It had absolutely no creatures in it. It was all counter spells and permanent removal and things like that. And the only way that I could actually do damage to somebody were there were these lands, I think they were called Shifting Sands, that you could turn into a creature for like 3 colorless mana. So whenever you had locked them down, you turn one of your lands into a person that we called him Landman, and you beat them to death with Landman. And like the reason it was called Draw Go is because that's how your turn went. You draw your card, you tell them to go. It was draw, go, and then whatever they do, counter it. Like that was the entire deck. Like they actually get something between it, you capsize it back to their hand. Like if they get too far in, you just lock everything down and just keep removing stuff. You like boomerang. There was a card called Forbid at the time that you could like discard 2 cards without having to pay the so you didn't have to pay. No, excuse me. It was Force of Will that you could discard cards to counter spells. So you didn't even have to have mana on the table or mana untapped to do it. And there was one that had, I think it was called Forbid, that had buyback. So you could pay a couple of extra mana and just get the card back into your hand. Like you cast it, counter theirs, and it boomerangs. You bought it back and put it back in your hand. Like this deck was absurd, and it had to make people so mad. Like there's no way this deck was fun to play against, but it was so much fun to play. It's the only thing I ever won a tournament with.
Yeah, you're like, the reason that people hate blue players, basically.
Oh yeah, I totally am. Like I'm not one of the people who's like, oh, I'm gonna do this flying stuff, or I'm gonna have these mist elementals. I'm like, no, I'm gonna counter everything that you do. And then it was one of the things that got me out of Magic initially, that made me really fall away from the game, is they actually stopped printing Counterspell in the sets. They said they would never print Counterspell, that 2 blue mana to counter anything was too powerful, and that everything from that point on would be have some sort of caveat to it, where it would have a more of a casting cost. It would only target things like creature spells or enchantments or artifacts, things like that, or targeting a spell that targets you or your creatures, something like that. But it was they would never just do counter target spell for 2 blue mana again. And that was like, you took the core of everything I loved about this game and you said it would never happen again. And so that really did kind of push me out of it, because they were so dramatically shifting what I liked to play.
Well,
and
I feel like they've balanced it a lot better since like when you were playing, which is probably one of the reasons that I'm latching on more this time than I ever have before. Because like, I feel like whenever I played when I was a kid, there was always somebody with a deck that would just do something that you didn't even know was possible, and then you had no response, and then you just lost. And it wasn't fun. Like, there was no fun there, you know? It was almost like you weren't even playing the same game. And sometimes it was against a blue player, like you're talking about. Sometimes it was just some, like, crazy combo that they're like, well, now I have infinite health and infinite attack, and I kill you. You're like, what?
Yep.
Okay. What? Like, and that was the kind of stuff that I hated.
I loved it.
It seems like it's a lot better these days.
I'm both happy and sad about that, because I like stuff like that. Like things like, if you look it up, just look up the Tolarian Academy decks and stuff like that. Like I looked at the banned list today for certain formats when I was downloading this. They banned Tolarian Academy already, and I'm just like, this is sad, because I needed all my mana for all of the artifacts. Like you got a mana for every artifact that you controlled, and it fed some really weird like taking infinite turns kind of gameplay.
Yeah, and I don't know, that's not fun when you're actually playing against other real people. Like, as much as I like to break a system when I'm playing against a computer or playing a single player game, like I don't enjoy that when I'm playing against other players, because it just ruins the fun for everybody.
See, and I am just enough of a jerk that I don't enjoy it in online games like this, like Hearthstone, like MTGA here. I probably won't like that nearly as much, but sitting across from somebody at a tournament, especially a stranger, and doing that to them and watching them get so frustrated gives me this weird, perverse, just joy that I can't explain, and probably explains why I was a griefer in UO as well. But it's like, yeah, I love frustrating people with control decks. But it's like, I've never been like a competitive trader. I've never been the kind of person who would play anything more than that. I'm like a single one-trick pony here. It's like people used to say that I'm getting ripped off on all the trades that we would do with people, but it's was like, I didn't care. I wasn't stupid enough to realize, that I might have been offering too much, but it's like, I got what I wanted. It's like in Hamilton, where there's the line that's like, you got more than you gave, but I wanted what I got. It was like, I very rarely got more than I gave, but pretty much every time I wanted what I got. Like, I got what I wanted. I still have a small binder in my desk drawer right now. I told you about the counter spells being so much my favorite. I still have a small binder in my desk right now in front of me that has counter spells that I was collecting in there right now. Just like, this has still been something that I've carried around with me for like 20 years that are just in there. It's like, that's one of my collections. But like, I still have like friends who, I have friends who did this. Like, the friend I'm going to talk about, he actually passed away a few years ago. He was a little bit older than us, and he graduated before us, but he actually made a living selling like early beta and alpha cards he had collected. Like, a part of his living at least was made from selling off like Moxes, and I think he had a few Black Lotuses from back in the day, like just things, and just in general high dollar Magic cards that he was able to pay monthly expenses with for a good long time.
Yeah, I've heard about people doing that too. I think I've had friends who've made a lot of money like buying and selling Magic cards, which is it's a whole like self-contained economy in a really weird way.
Oh yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
it's absolutely insane.
Well, and, yeah, I mean, like I said, like you had way more of a history with it than I did, but there's, I've been close enough to it that like I've kind of internalized some of this stuff, and then some of it I'm just coming back around to learning in the last couple of weeks here. So yeah, I wanted to talk about like the basic plus type of game info, where some of the things you're talking about, and I know like you're loving it and geeking out about it, but like I have no context for the cards you're talking about or like the specific decks or anything. And so I think some of the nuance for people who are like in my position, where it's like, I kind of know Magic, I kind of don't know Magic. Like, where's the interesting part? Like, give me the next step to get me interested in it. And I think a lot of that comes from like just one more step after the basic game. So one of the things I want to talk about was like, there's 5 different colors of mana. And like, if you've been playing Magic, like this is like the dumbest, like most easy, boring, like it's a core part of the game. But if you haven't, it's really interesting because kind of like what you were saying, it's almost like choosing a hero in Hearthstone. It's like the flavor of your deck. It's the way that it's going to be played, and there's white, there's black, there's green, red, and blue. And then you can also mix and match these colors. And so I'm going through the newbie experience right now where like I'm unlocking upgrades for my like pre-made decks that the game has made for me. And then once you get far enough along, you unlock, if you go down like 2 trees that are next to each other, you can unlock like a dual color deck. And those are super fun and super interesting for me. So I guess, do you want to start with blue because you love blue so much?
I love blue so much. And like immediately, as soon as I was able to edit that deck, I started putting in control cards from the white deck that they start you with and immediately started hybridizing in it. Like there was, it was immediate. Like I never played a single game against somebody with solid blue in this one because I didn't have the card base to do it. So I started going down both of the trees on that.
Yeah. And so it's called mono. Like if you have one color, it's like a mono blue or like a mono red, right? Otherwise you start mixing it. And so blue at its core is all about like spell casting. And I mean, the flavor of it is like water. Like when you look at it, the elements behind it, all of that, it's water. But
like the base land is the basic land is an island. It's like it's wizards and things like that. The pretty traditional. If you look at WoW, it's the arcane mage that you see if you've ever played World of Warcraft. Like that is what like the arcane mage is the blue stuff in. And
it just seems to have like lots of spells, and it seems a little bit more like artifact heavy, but like spells is kind of the overall overwhelming. Like, yeah, if you want to cast spells and you want to do spells all day and you want more control, like blue is where you want to be.
Man, I remember when they started introducing so much of the artifact stuff, giving it to blue, and it was so much fun. When that was brand new, that they started really leaning in with the artificer stuff, it was so good. That's right around the time of the Tolarian Academy, like infinite turns and stuff like that. Like it was so much fun.
Yeah, so from there, red is another one that you can build it a couple different ways, but it's really there's creatures in there that do damage, but there's also a lot of like direct damage spells and just like damaging spells in ways. Whereas blue is more like tricky and controlling, and like you can be a jerk like BJ was. Red is much more like I can do damage to you with my spells. Also, I have creatures, and red's all themed around fire. And what's their basic land? See, I don't even know these things yet.
Mountain.
Thank you. But it's a mix of like creatures and offensive spells. Green is like nature and elves. That's kind of like the theming around it. The land is a forest? Question mark? Yeah, okay.
It is.
And they do things like they do creature enhancement for small creatures, but they also have like really big creatures in green. Like the biggest creatures in the game, for the most part, live in green decks. You just have to have a lot of mana to be able to summon them out. So you have to survive long enough to get to late game to be able to like drop these huge monsters on people.
And what's really funny about it to me is that they still have this kind of base gameplay in like games like Hearthstone, where they took from this. Like that's what green does, or druid does a lot in Hearthstone, is have these tiny creatures that or have a lot of tiny creatures, and then you buff them and they do a lot, and then you have these gigantic creatures that come out later. And the same with Jaina and blue and stuff like that. Like it's just really interesting to me how these archetypes have moved forward.
Yeah, and like split off and like taking different bits and pieces of the flavor. It's definitely interesting. Black is undead, so it's like it's a lot of zombies, it's a lot of vampires. So vampires kind of like steal the enemy's health, give it to you. Zombies are there's a lot of interesting like graveyard stuff that happens with black, where like a creature can get killed or can be banished to your graveyard, and then you can do things with black cards or black spells to interact with your graveyard, either resurrect someone or bring something back or cast something directly from it. There's a lot of just like I wrote undead weirdness in here, but I think I summarized it pretty well between those couple things.
Yeah, actually, the zombie stuff is fairly new to me. Like, I've always been, since I stopped being competitive and like going to tournaments and things like that, I have like stayed Magic adjacent, where I've seen the major new releases, seen what's come out, different sets and abilities and stuff like that, and the somehow like all of the zombie stuff that keeps adding into each other in the Ravnica cards that we get right now is all new to me. Like seeing how the zombies do, but I figured it was going to be a zombie horde, so I've been playing very carefully around black players today.
Yeah, I've been really liking the black decks. I haven't picked one yet. I don't have something that I can say like I'm this mana color or this dual mana color. I'm playing around with a lot. I just know that I'm not super drawn to like mono blue or mono red, and I think those are the only two things I'm sure of at this point. But yeah, black is appealing. I feel like I'm playing that a little bit more than I'm playing the other ones.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah,
I could see you being black-green more than anything.
I might end up with something like that. I'm kind of interested to see where I land between all the different colors and stuff. And then the last one is white. So white is like angels is kind of the theme, and I don't actually remember. What's the land?
Plains.
Plains, thank you. It's all about like, it's not all about heaven, but it's like, it's angels and it's like people that are fighting for justice, and that kind of thing is the theming. But the main thing that I feel like I see with white, it's a pretty good mix of stuff, but they have more flying than anybody else in the game.
See, I think that's blue, actually. Like, blue has so much flying that you can manipulate with. It surprised me. Well, it may not now. Let me put it that way. Like, the number of flying things that I've seen in white has been a lot more than I'm used to. I'm used to seeing things like First Strike and Vigilance and really, like, more military type stuff. These heroes who are staunch, who do that stuff and have some flying to go ahead, like Sarah Angel and some of the others.
Yeah, kind of like militant angels is kind of some of the themes around it. Yeah, it's fascinating. They have like, I don't know, I feel like white is a really good mix of a lot of different things from a lot of the different other colors, and it kind of represents it all well. So I was just trying to think about like what's different, and that whole angel theming and like flying seems a little bit more prevalent there. I've
been using the deck I've been using today, at least. I've had a lot of flying stuff, and so the ones that really give me more trouble are the ones that can actually block them, and that's been the white decks that I've been playing against, because I think a lot of people where I am, just in the normal play area, are using a lot of the pre-constructed decks still.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So the mana colors are cool. Like, I'm having a lot of fun like digging into it and realizing, oh, I like this, or I'm kind of more drawn to that, or I don't like that. But there's definitely like picking what kind of player you are, picking what kind of flavor you're after, and then The other thing that I wanted to mention, well, a couple other things here, is like different formats. Like there's so many different formats of Magic, and I knew these existed, but I didn't really get my head around it until I started looking it up in the past few weeks here. So standard is basically what we've been talking about. It's kind of like the default way to play. But then there's things like drafting, sealed, tournaments, two-headed giant, commander. There's these unsets. So like drafting is where you open up a bunch of packs, you hold all the cards in front of you, you pick one, and then you like pass it to the person on your right, and the person on your left passes it to you, and you get to pick one card from that. So you get to see tons and tons of cards, and you slowly build your deck out of this until all the cards are gone.
And I love drafting in person because you get to keep the cards. I mean, you're paying for the cards and you keep what you draft. You have to make a decision on whether you're going to pick the cards that will help you during that tournament, whether you're going to pick the cards that will mess over somebody else in the tournament. Like if you see a super power card, you don't want anyone else to have it, whether you use it or not, you might take it, or the ones that are either really valuable or really powerful for a deck that you're working on or playing, that you draft for that as opposed to working in that same tournament. Online doesn't quite have that the nuance that in person does in a card shop, but I love drafts.
Yeah, and I haven't done enough to know how I feel about it yet, but I have done the next one on the list, which is sealed, and I liked sealed a lot. It's where you're given a bunch of packs, kind of same idea as the draft, it's just an isolated set of packs you have to work with. You open them all, and then that's it. Like you own all of those cards, and you have to make a deck with whatever you opened, basically. And it's kind of, I don't know, when I have to go and like play in the open ranked matches against everybody, I worry about my deck construction. I don't have fun like trying to make my deck better and fighting against the metagame. I would rather just go grab a deck that's strong in the meta and like learn how to pilot it. But in sealed, that's not an issue because everybody else is under those same constraints. So everyone's just trying to make the best of a bad situation. And I had a really good run in a sealed game or a sealed draft or whatever it's called the other day online. And I had so much fun doing that.
I need to find where these things are in the UI. That I know they're there, but I haven't been able to find like where Commander is or anything like that.
Well, a lot of these aren't yet. So
okay.
I don't think there's straight up tournaments in here at all yet. A tournament is exactly what it sounds like. It's a tournament like in any other game. Two-headed giant is 2v2. That definitely doesn't exist yet in Magic the Gathering Arena. And Commander is one where I've never played it, but as I understand it, you like pick a hero and you build a deck around them, right?
Like I think Commander is, and this is where it's like I'm a Magic adjacent to this. It's like I think you pick a Planeswalker and that's around it. I think, I don't know. I don't actually know that much, but I know it sounds really interesting based on where CCGs and online games have gone lately.
Yeah, and then there's the whole idea of unsets, which is another thing. It's a different format you can play. They have a different color border around the edge. I think it's silver. And they're basically built to break the game. They're things that don't work with the game proper. They're unstable cards. So that's where the un comes from. And they're specifically meant not to work with standard formats because they just do crazy things. So that's a whole separate format too. So out of these...
So are there a lot of those? Because the only one I've ever known was the unglued set that came out. Like that's the only that was the first one that they did with a silver border, and that I played a bunch with it because they're ridiculous cards. But I didn't know that there were more that went with Magic stuff like that. I had no idea.
I don't think it's something they release regularly, but when I was looking it up today, it seemed like there's a few different sets out there for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the Magic the Gathering, like this is just Magic the Gathering, but for Arena, the ones that they definitely have are standard. That's kind of the main game. And then drafting and sealed are in the game for sure, because I've seen all of those as options. And then one of the last things I want to touch on was like the different sets, which is the thing that like I kind of intellectually knew, but I didn't really get my head around it until recently. And standard is a rotating group of Magic cards that it keeps like updating over time. So most sets enter standard when they're released, and then they drop out something like 21 months later, according to kind of the things I've found online. At any given time, standard contains somewhere between like 5 and 8 different sets. So one of those sets is the core set for the current year. So like right now it's, Magic the Gathering core set 2019. And then there's like, I think the previous 3 expansions that came out last year, and then there's like the 2 current sets that are out right now for Ravnica, and then there's a new one coming out soon. So the 2 that are out right now are Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Alliance. The one that's coming out like in a couple weeks here in the beginning of May is War of the Spark, and that kind of completes this trilogy of sets.
And like I'm I didn't realize where we were in terms of a block release cycle, and I had no idea what. I still don't actually have any idea what is in Arena here that we can pull from. Like, I'm not seeing any older cards, so are we only within standard and getting like Ravnica packs right now? Because
No,
I've not seen any others.
Yeah, it looks like it's whatever's in standard right now. So it's the Ravnica cards, it's the core set, and then it's like the 2 or 3 expansions that were before Ravnica, which I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but I looked it up the other day, and that's what it looked like.
And I haven't really looked at any of that then. Like I said, I've played it like between like taking breaks at work today.
One of the things that I wanted to like draw the attention to is there's a website called, it's literally just called What Is in Standard, or sorry, What's in Standard. If you click on that, it'll tell you exactly what's in standard. And if you go there at any time, it'll show you the exact release cycle and what's in standard, what's coming up, what's dropping out, when it's dropping out, all of that kind of stuff. So at first it seemed a little overwhelming to me, but mostly I think what you can do is you just buy core set until you have enough cards, and then you can kind of just buy the latest releases and kind of go from wherever you started.
Man, this is bringing me back so much. Just like the idea of this, like I got really put out on Hearthstone when they started introducing things like standard and legacy. And I'm so used to it being called type 1 and type 2 that when you mention standard, I'm like, now what? Because that's type 2 in my mind. I haven't played in tournaments long enough since they've changed the name. And but it's like I'm seeing this stuff and I click on what's in standard and I'm like, oh, okay. It's like I love it. Like I just love it so much. I got to be careful. This is going to make me have to be really careful too.
That doesn't surprise me. But you know, the one like final thing here that's like high level that I wanted to cover is Magic has a story. Like I didn't know this. I didn't know that there was a story built around these cards. I thought it was like flavor, you know, and like a little bit of world building. I didn't realize there was actually like an ongoing story, and every expansion now builds on the story and moves it along. And that's so interesting to me. I don't have any other thoughts beyond like, I want to know more about this.
That didn't start at the beginning of Magic, but it started pretty early on because I started playing in Weatherlight, and I want to say that the Tempest block and right before it, the Weatherlight block those were the first ones that had a cohesive story, and those were generally told, and before that were the few before that, like the Mirage block and Ice Age and things like that, the early sets were told primarily through the flavor text. Like there wasn't anything outside of that. But later, as they started progressing, like they started publishing books, and now you've got short stories. I think there's a short story by Brandon Sanderson for this upcoming set. And like I used to read the books pretty often because it was actually a pretty good fantasy story. I have no idea what's going on now, but I may soon. Like I'm going to end up reading the Brandon Sanderson stuff that was put out by it. For it.
Cool. Apparently, I have hooked you back in, just like my brother hooked me back in. Before we bounce off the topic, I want to know, like, where are you with it right now?
Okay, so this is my one day during breaks at work take on this, on Arena at least. Like, it is fun. It's really honestly what I wanted Hearthstone to be initially, because Magic is a lot more nuanced than Hearthstone's capable of being. Like that wasn't the game that they set out with Hearthstone, and so this is what I wanted and what I like about online CCGs. I like it. I gave him $5. Like I've already been playing Blue. Like I said, it's still fun to play online. It's fun to do it, and the client is good enough and fun enough, well put together that it's not frustrating to try to play a control deck online. They still do have some problems with the interface where it's kind of slow. The commands aren't really intuitive. There are some times where it gets hung up and things just don't happen. But it's early on in the game's life, so it will. Those will be, ironed out. Like you said last week, they don't have a friends list yet. Like I said, it pauses and waits for a response all the time. Like if you're able to cast an instant or ability, it makes you resolve it right then. And I understand why, but I don't know if there's a better way to do it. But it really gives away what people have in their hands. Like when you
can
cast
fix that. So, like you said, you played this for one day. There's a thing in the bottom right where you have like, you know how you can stop on different phases of the turn if you want to. There's a little like fast forward arrow right there. If you click that, it'll automatically skip unless the opponent plays a card. So it's not quite what you want, where it's like completely like they have no idea what's going on, but it makes it so it stops a lot less and it's easier to not give away that you have something.
Okay, because the big thing is that like I would play a creature and all of a sudden it pauses and I know that those people have something to take care of that in their hand.
Yes.
And so if they don't do anything, it changes the way that I play, and that changes the way that that Magic as a game is played. But I don't think there's a better way to do it. I mean, I can't think of any way to do it online. I like seeing the new art that I've missed over the years that I haven't seen, like seeing new art on Volcanic Dragon and just stuff like that made me really happy. Seeing Llanowar elves and this new like weird 3D moving thing was really cool. And I hate the tutorial so much, just so badly. It made me want to scream. Just you can't skip it. It makes you go through it step by step. It is so slow. And if you know the basics of Magic at all, and which I know you didn't going into this, so it works
I knew the
great
basics. I knew the basics, and I'm so glad that tutorial exists because I needed that refresher. I needed it to like hold my hand for a couple games. And as much as it bothers people like you, like that needs to be there for people like me.
5 games. It was 5 games.
Yeah, but they're quick and you can't lose them. So
I hate
it's
them.
fast.
Oh, I wanted to skip it. Like I knew I wasn't going to bounce off of it at that point, but if it had not been Magic, there's a good chance that I would have just come back later. Been like, I don't want to do this. It won't let me skip. I'm not going to do this stupid stuff. Because I love the option of being able to skip a tutorial. That's kind of one of my gaming pet peeves, though.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair enough, especially because you know it so well. I mean,
yeah,
where I'm
but
at
I
with
like it. Like, I'm still going to play it.
That's good. No, I'm glad you like it. I'm glad I got you to try it. That was kind of one of the goals there. Where I'm with it at the moment is like, this was my main geekery for the week. Like, this is what I spent most of my week doing with free time. I don't really want to build up a card collection. I don't really want to do the physical object version of this. That's just not as interesting to me. I might be tempted if there's like a couple decks you can buy that are pre-built that are balanced against each other and they're simple enough just to like be able to do it every once in a while or to introduce somebody to it or play with my kids in person. But beyond that, I'm really only interested in Magic the Gathering Arena, and I'm super excited that it'll come to other platforms later. It's PC only right now, but like I would eat this game up if it was on mobile or if it was on like, iPad, tablet, whatever.
If they did that, that would mean they had to change some of those interface quirks that I'm having issues with, and that would be so awesome on iOS or Android.
Yeah, I don't see how they wouldn't bring it to those eventually. It seems like the logical next step somewhere along the way.
Yep.
And so what I'm really liking right now is the mastery tree. So like the new player experience, earning those like mastery orbs and then using them to slowly unlock upgrades to the pre-built decks. It keeps me coming back because it gives me really interesting things to work towards.
It is really cool.
I really hope that I'm able to keep my momentum up after I finish all of the mastery trees, because really I wish there was like an extended mastery tree after the new player experience, because I want something to give me interesting goals with interesting rewards and hook me, because that's what gets me into games. You have to give me a goal. Like I'm an achiever and I'm an explorer in games. If you don't give me enough to like latch onto and like work towards, I'll fall off of a game. And I don't want that to happen because I'm having so much fun. But I could see myself starting to feel like that after I finish the mastery tree. So we'll see in a week or two how I feel. I'll probably finish it up this week.
Well, what about things like collecting the digital cards, like getting the packs and earning the gold and things like that, like you did in Hearthstone? Does that have any kind of draw for you?
I don't really like opening packs that much. Like, it's just I want to have an interesting deck, and if I have to open a bunch of packs to get to that, I will. But it's not, I don't know. I don't, there's something that's just like, it doesn't click with me in a way that it gives me like a hit of, like anything that's enjoyable. It's just like, okay, I'll open this pack and like I'll click on the thing to see what the special card is, and then I move on with my day. It's not a joyous experience. One of the things that I did find though was like I really liked doing that sealed draft that I did. There was so much fun because I know everybody else is working under the same constraints, and you just have to make the best of a bad situation with whatever cards you have. But then you get to keep all those cards afterwards. So that seemed to be like a really good way for me to get into it, is to do the sealed, and I might try like an actual draft too, and see what I think of that type of thing.
Yeah, I will be interested to see what you think about the actual draft versus sealed, because they're both really cool formats and they're both really fun to play. So I want to know which one you like better.
Yeah, I do too. I'll probably play a little bit with that this weekend. Whenever I finish the new player experience, I'll definitely do something with drafting again, like something else. And I really like the deck unlock progression. I've started unlocking the multicolor decks, the pre-built ones, and they're super fun. So I want to know more about that and how the colors work together. My kids are playing Magic the Gathering Arena with me, which is super interesting and fun for me. We're taking turns and kind of helping each other see things that the other people aren't seeing. But there have been a couple nights where like one of us is sitting at the computer and the other two people are like standing or sitting in chairs right behind them, like talking about it. And that's so fun with my kids.
That is really neat.
Yeah. And I mean, really, I just feel like after I finish that new player mastery tree, I might be on the verge of just putting a bunch of money into this to get like the baseline card pool into a really good place, which I don't know. I wasn't expecting that when I started playing this again. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll pick away at it and, earn gold in the game and earn gems and then unlock packs slowly. But I kind of want to give myself a boost. Like if I'm still enjoying it as much as I am right now, I might drop some like serious money on like $50 or something, to get like to buy a bunch of the core set, or maybe I know there's a couple pre-order deals that are really good right now for War of the Spark because it's about to come out in a week or two. So I'd be tempted to maybe drop, $50 even on like the core sets packs, and then like $50 on the pre-order for the next War of the Spark. Like I might do that. I'm very tempted to do that.
It's odd to me on how they've got this particular business model going for Arena, because it's so much easier when you're doing stuff like that to invest and get into it like that and just jump into the wider metagame of buying singles, that you get everything you need specifically for this deck in the like side market, in the player economy. Like you'll go on eBay and get it, you'll trade people for it, you'll just go to Magic singles sites that's not dating but buying individual cards. I read that Magic singles and I made myself giggle. But you go do that, like that's a real shift for me to the idea of how to get into it, is investing in for randomness, which, yeah, you're going to buy boosters, you're going to buy boxes of stuff as a Magic player. But when you really need to hone in, you don't have the ability to just buy what you need, but buying those packs gives you the wild cards that you can just craft what you need. So it's just a different way of doing it. I have to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I haven't really spent anything outside of, there's that new player bundle. I think I bought the same one you did. That's like $5,
Yep. It's $5. It's like, why not?
Yeah. After that, I don't know where to put the money to like actually get up and running. And that feels like an oversight on their part. It's like once you're into it, once you have enough of a card pool, you can start. There's a lot of ways to get like the most recent decks, or through drafting or through sealed, or, just buying them straight up. But it feels like there's a step in between there missing. And I wish it existed. Something for like $15, $20. That's like, here's your next step. Like, here's a bunch of the core stuff. Here's a bunch of packs. It's enough to get you started.
Yeah. Here's a $20 bundle of $20 Magic 2019.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
something like that.
If there was that, I would probably buy that this week. If I keep playing it like I do, there's a good chance I would drop the $20 on something like that. But I look at the War of the Spark bundle for $50, and it's a lot to spend on a new game, but B, also a game that is untested like this, more than anything on the kind of support. But Wizards tends to be pretty good about keeping up with stuff. So it's just $50 is a lot to ask for that next buy-in.
Right, and that's why I haven't actually spent it. I've spent $5 on this game. I'm sitting at the point where it feels like what I could do and what's viable is to put down $50 or $100 one time to get a really good like baseline. And then from there, it's just kind of casually like, on payday, maybe like buy a couple packs or do a draft or do a sealed, like, and you just throw a couple dollars at it at a time. And that would be enough to keep up. It's just this initial like how do I get onboarded? How do I get enough to like get in to the point where I can just keep up?
That's a really good point. I totally see that, and wasn't able to pinpoint what it was or really elaborate on it, but I saw that and didn't really, you know what I'm trying to say.
I do. So I think you and I are kind of in the same place with Arena, which is very interesting.
I really like this game.
Our main topic went long, but that was like seriously my geekery for the week. So the rest of my geekery is pretty quick. But before we do that, let's talk about the geeky offer of the week.
So we have a Patreon. Just very briefly, you guys go to patreon.com/geek2geekcast, pledge to support us, and everything goes directly back to the podcast to pay for hosting and that kind of stuff. So patreon.com/geek2geekcast.
Around the network this week, Geektitude, Bones still take time to heal. We won't hold it against Joe. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. They talked about BTS and more K-pop stuff, it's super interesting to me, even though I'm not into it at all.
Have you listened to this one?
Yeah, I listened to it. It was interesting.
I haven't listened to this one, but I know that there was a conversation on Discord about how great this particular episode is. So I got to go back to it soon, or go to it soon.
And then Capsule J is streaming on Tuesdays from 8 to 11 Eastern, and sometimes on Thursdays and weekends. Troidal is streaming on Thursdays and also randomly sometimes after dinner. And then he's also has that ongoing podcast series right now that's a short-term podcast, but it's releasing. Is it every day? It's like a daily release. It's called Podcasters Assemble, probably. And it's a crowdsourced Marvel hype podcast leading up to the release of Avengers Endgame. So that's another really cool one to check out.
Speaking of Endgame, I saw today, for you guys listening to this, be careful. There are spoilers for Endgame that got leaked. There are videos going around. So plug your eyes and close your ears.
Yep, I guess that works. I didn't even know that.
I read about it on Slack today. One of the listeners posted about it.
Okay. What do you have for Weekly Geekery this week?
So I've been listening to the Interdependency Book 2. I can't remember the actual name of it, but I know it's the second Interdependency book by John Scalzi, and it is so good. I have been using it to go out for runs and walks and really motivate myself to go out. And I am powering through this book. Like, I'm amazed I didn't finish it today. Honestly, if we didn't have to come in here and podcast when we did, there's a good chance I would have finished it today. And I started it like day before yesterday. It is a magnificent book. I'm so into this series, and I don't know when the third one comes out because, like we said on our podcast about books, we never know when books come out. But I cannot wait for book 3. Like, this is one of the best series of books I've read in years. Like, it's up there with Mistborn and Way of Kings in terms of just how much I love this.
Yeah, it's one of Scalzi's better series. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I actually think I like this one a lot better than Old Man's War, and I love Old Man's War.
Wow.
So it's this one just hits all of those. It's Dune, but it's better kind of things. Like, I love Dune, but this one hasn't hit the God Emperor of Dune level yet. So, the Star Wars trailer, I know this is on yours, so we'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to yours, but I'm still playing Trails in the Sky. I've been playing this a lot, actually. This is primarily what I've been playing this week. I'm like 22 hours in now, and this game is great. The story is wonderful. The characters are unique, whether or not you like them or not. They're definitely unique and have wonderful personalities, and I can't remember if I said it last week, but the reason I think I've fallen into this is because of the writing and the world building, but also because the characters speak the way that people speak. That when there's dialogue, they actually talk like it's a conversation as opposed to just having this kind of stilted RPG dialogue and conversation that happens sometimes. So it's drawn me in, and I'm playing so many more of the sequels to this one. I probably won't do them back to back because they are very intense and very very long, but they're definitely one of those series that I'm going to make it through all of these Trails games, because 22 hours in and I'm still as invested as I was at hour 2.
I'm glad you like it so much. I like that you still like it after, a week or two.
Yeah, just been playing it, and whenever I have free time, grabbing the Vita and playing it, and that's a really good sign that whenever I could be grabbing my phone to do something, I'm grabbing the Vita to get a little bit further in this.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, for me this week, I think I might be done with Elder Scrolls Blades. I'm still opening it every day, and I look at it, and I just go, maybe not. Like it's one of those where it's on the cusp of like, I don't know if I'm going to delete it. I might just like put it into a hidden folder in the back of my phone or something and like wait for it to update for 6 months. But it feels like the play sessions are a little too long to be a mobile game. Like the dungeon crawls are slightly too long. And also the level scaling feels off. Like it feels like it's getting too hard, too fast, and not in a fun way. So yeah, I think I'm about ready to put that one down. It's not as awesome as I was kind of hoping it would be, but that's okay. I mean, at least I got a week or two of enjoyment out of it. And then the Jedi Fallen Order trailer, I'm going to talk about this before I talk about other Star Wars stuff. So like this is the new game coming out from Respawn Entertainment, and I know it's like EA published, but like I'm all in for this game. It's from Respawn. They make really good games. Like I really like Titanfall 2, and they're the people who like revamped Call of Duty to make Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 before they split off and became their own studio with Respawn. So these guys used to be at Infinity Ward. And I mean, this Jedi Fallen Order game is single player. There's no multiplayer at all. There's no microtransactions. It's a story-based game, and it's a third-person action game. And like all of this is stuff that I loved from previous Star Wars games. So all signs point to me loving this game.
I am not excited about this game. I want to be excited about this game, but I think that I'm going to have to wait and see what actual reactions are before I decide to pick it up. Like, it could very well be a day one or, week one purchase for me, but I'm going to have to wait on other people like you and the internet in general to tell me how it is, because I've been burned too many times on AAA day one releases, but also EA action games are not really my thing. The games that Respawn has made and those people are responsible for, I don't really like, and third-person action games are not something that can keep my attention. So I'm hoping that it tells a good story and is kind of like that Force Unleashed kind of action game like that, because I loved the Force Unleashed. Just that kind of makes you actually feel like a Jedi kind of thing. The trailer, the story, everything seemed impressive, but it has so many negatives just bearing down against it in my mind that I'm mega hesitant about it. Like, I was not terribly impressed.
Yeah, it's not hard to get my Star Wars money when it comes to video games. And I know this. I know
That's
it's like
fair.
a weak point for me, so I might as well just embrace it. Like, if you tell me single player AAA Star Wars game, that's all I need. You can have $60. Like, it doesn't matter anything that you say after that point, as long as the game's not like broken on release, Like, that's what I want. And I will buy it, I will play it, I will beat it. I know all of these things already. Whether or not it's a great game, whether or not it stands the test of time, like, I know myself well enough to be able to talk about it and say whether or not it's like for you or for other people.
Right.
But I know I'm gonna buy it, so I might as well get excited for it. It's kind of where
That's
I'm
true.
at. Yeah.
That's fair.
But I mean, the other Star Wars thing this week is the episode 9 trailer. And I don't want to like dive in and like do a deep dive with all the like spoilers and not spoilers, but just like theories and all that stuff. I'm hyped about it. Like, I'm excited.
Yeah.
And they basically said that this is the end of the Skywalker saga. And I think that's a really good thing for Star Wars. Like, the universe is so much wider than that, but they have to tie a ribbon on, like they have to put a bow on this series and just finish it up. They need to wrap it up so they can move on to the next thing.
And I'm really excited about it. Like, I saw this trailer and there are things in it that really, really excite me. There are things in it that have already got my brain looking at how they framed things in the trailer, that I'm like, thinking about where they're going. I'm always going to be hesitant about J.J. Abrams finishing anything because he's never done it before, but I like J.J. Abrams too much not to get excited about this. The Force Awakens, I think, is my favorite Star Wars movie at this point, and like, I am really, really hopeful about this one, where I'm not quite all in like I was for the Force Awakens release, but I really liked The Last Jedi. I really think that this one is going to be fantastic as well. It's I liked what I saw.
Yeah, I'm tempering my expectations because I loved The Last Jedi so much, and it finally was kind of like nodding towards a wider world of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And this feels like it's going to close back down a little bit to finish out the Skywalker stuff. And that's okay, because I think they're going to actually finish out the Skywalker stuff. But also, it's back to J.J. Abrams. It's back to like I hope he has enough freedom to do new things with it and not just like recycle into the same stuff that we've seen from the Skywalker saga. That was one of the things I liked about The Last Jedi so much, is that it did so much different. So either way, I'm going to be excited for this. It's like, the 9th movie out of this epic saga that I love. Like, there's no way that I'm not going to be excited. But
I'm super excited for it because, like you said, the larger world, the larger galaxy out there in the Star Wars universe, with Rian Johnson getting his own trilogy, he can explore that like he did in The Last Jedi, and then wrap up with J.J. Abrams putting, like you said, that nice bow on the Skywalker saga that kind of also branches off into it. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, the Rian Johnson trilogy, like that's what I'm actually the most excited for in Star Wars, but I'm going to be very excited for Episode 9. Like there's no question in my mind. And then the other people who are working on the next Star Wars series or saga or trilogy or whatever are the showrunners from Game of Thrones, which you've heard that, right?
No.
Yeah, so the guys who run the Game of Thrones show, and I bring this up just because it's a nice transition, because Game of Thrones final season kicked off. But yeah, they're the other ones that are working on Star Wars movies. Is Rian Johnson and them. Those are the only 2 sets of Star Wars movies that aren't like on hold or canceled at the moment.
I did not know that was, and if I did know that, I've completely forgotten it.
Yeah, so Game of Thrones is back. I'm not going to spoil anything, don't worry. And this, I kept it for the very end of the show for this reason, if you didn't want to hear anything at all. But I basically binged the second half of season 7 over the weekend just to prep for season 8. And I picked up in season 7 with the battle with the wagon train. I guess if you haven't seen season 7, I won't describe it any more than that. But that's a really good place if you're looking for someone where to like, okay, where do I pick back up and like get back into it? That's a great place to start. It's about halfway through the season. And I watched through the end of the season and I finished it the morning, like Sunday morning. And then the new episode for season 8 came out on Sunday night. So that was about perfect. So my wife and I watched that together, which is always nice to find something that like we can watch together because our taste in TV is so different most of the time, but we both love Game of Thrones. And this first episode was just like a lot of super interesting character reunions. And I'm not going to say more than that to be spoilery, but it feels like that might have been the very last setup show or the last setup episode of the entire show, because the finale is coming, But all of these character like reunions and like interactions, they're all in the same places finally. And those needed to happen so that the story can keep moving forward. And a lot of this week was like catching up the characters on things that we as the audience know, but seeing how they react to that information because they don't have the same information that we've had for a while.
And Jennifer and I haven't watched it yet, but we are either going to watch it tonight or we're probably going to watch it in the over the weekend to try, to watch it with the next episode, because we like to binge things a lot more than wait week to week sometimes. And so I'll eventually get to this. It's I'm excited about it. I like it, but I'll eventually get to it.
Yeah, and I will watch it every Sunday because I'm super excited for the end. I'm basically just excited for like the next 5 Sunday nights because there's only 5 left. Like it's only 6 episodes this season, and each one I think from here on out is like an hour and a half, something like that. Like they're going to be epic episodes. So I'm super excited.
Was this past episode an hour and a half as well?
No, this was about an hour, and they said that the whole season 8 has about the same runtime as season 7 did, and it's 2 less episodes. So they must have really long episodes later in the season.
Right.
Yep.
That's good though, because the typical episode structure doesn't necessarily always work for storytelling, and I'm glad that they were able to break out of that for this particular series as it's led up to something so desired and hyped up.
Yeah. So there we go. There's your Game of Thrones report, I guess. I'm not going to do this every week, but it was the kickoff of the final season, so I'll probably have thoughts at the end of the season, and I won't mention it again between now and then.
We could do another worst episode ever on Game of Thrones.
No, we're not going to do that.
Guys, if you want to hear the worst episode that Void and I have ever done, go find our Game of Thrones episode in the archives and listen, because it's bad.
We were trying to force ourselves to say things that, I don't know, I think we thought that we had more thoughts than we actually did, and then we tried to make it into a full-length episode, and we just learned not to do that. The main topics are now however long they are. Like this episode was probably like 45, 50 minutes talking about magic, and that was fine because we wanted to. And some weeks it's like 10 minutes main topic. So we're less stuck in the structure than we were at that point. Don't listen to that Game of Thrones episode.
It's so bad.
That's probably it for this week. You can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. Our email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on on Twitter at Geek2Geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/Geek2Geekcast.
And we also have great discussions on Slack and Discord, so go to geek2geekmedia.com for invite links, and you can hang out with all of us and then see all the other stuff on the network.
I blog at agrainmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as at Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's, and I'm blogging at the Media Network site.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, geeks. Watch the Game of Thrones episode or listen to it. Listen, it's a podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we are the hosts of Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. We are two best friends who love pop culture and talking about pretty much whatever we want. Katie!
Yes?
Stop thinking about Zac Efron and tell our future listeners what some of our latest episodes have been about.
Well, we've talked about Zac Efron.
No, get it together, Katie.
Fine. We've talked about fan fiction, classical literature adaptations, favorite TV couples, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.
Hello friends, this is Troidal Power inviting you to join me over on Twitch most weeknights, sometime after dinner. Video games have always been a social hobby for me, with friends and family crammed together on a couch, chatting away while someone holds the controller. And thanks to the power of the internet, I've got my own virtual couch over on Twitch, where you can kick back and goof off while I play games. Find me on Twitch by searching Troidal Power, that's TROYTLE Power, to snag a spot on the couch.